What happens when a man who spent 3 years portraying the Son of God walks onto live television and faces his greatest test not as an actor, but as a believer? What happens when Jonathan Roumie, the face millions associate with Jesus Christ himself, steps onto the View stage expecting a friendly conversation about faith and storytelling, only to find himself trapped in the most calculated religious ambush ever orchestrated by Joy Behar and her co-hosts? This isn't just another celebrity interview gone wrong. This isn't another awkward moment where a host asks an uncomfortable question and everyone laughs it off by the next commercial break. This is the morning that Jonathan Roumie, humble, soft-spoken, eternally gracious Jonathan Roumie, was pushed so far beyond what any person of faith should endure on national television that he delivered a response so devastating, so unexpectedly powerful, so filled with a love that felt almost supernatural, that Joy Behar sat in complete silence for 47 seconds of live television. 47 seconds where you could hear audience members breathing. 47 seconds where even Whoopi Goldberg, legendary for never being speechless, couldn't find words. 47 seconds where the cameras seemed afraid to move, capturing a moment so raw, so real, that it would be replayed millions of times in the days to come. By the time Jonathan walked off that stage, 3 things had happened that nobody, not the producers, not Whoopi, not even Joy Behar herself, could have predicted. A hardened skeptic would question everything she thought she knew about people of faith. A crew member would fall to his knees backstage asking about salvation. And 2.3 million people would search for The Chosen that very night, making it the single largest traffic spike in the show's history. What Jonathan said in those 9 minutes wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't calculated. It wasn't even planned. But when a man who carries the presence of Christ encounters Joy Behar's carefully constructed trap armed with nothing but truth and love, the impact is absolutely biblical. And what happened next would prove that sometimes the most powerful sermons aren't preached in churches. They're preached in the fire. The invitation arrived on a Tuesday afternoon in late October, sent directly to Jonathan's publicist with all the professional warmth that major network daytime television could muster. The Chosen had just released its 4th season to unprecedented acclaim, with episodes breaking streaming records and fan testimonies flooding social media from every corner of the globe. Stories of marriages restored, addictions broken, faith rekindled in hearts that had grown cold and cynical. The show wasn't just entertainment anymore. It had become a movement, a phenomenon that transcended demographics and denominations. The View wanted Jonathan Roumie, and the pitch was perfect. Come talk about the show's impact, share behind-the-scenes stories, discuss what it means to portray such an iconic figure. Standard promotional circuit material, the kind of appearance that helps a show reach audiences who might never stumble across it otherwise. His team reviewed the request, checked the talking points, confirmed the segment length. Everything looked straightforward, professional, safe. Jonathan arrived at the ABC studios on that crisp November morning carrying the same peaceful energy that had made him beloved by cast and crew throughout 4 seasons of production. He wore a simple navy sweater over a collared shirt, nothing flashy, nothing that screamed Hollywood. His presence was quiet but unmistakably warm, the kind of warmth that made production assistants feel comfortable enough to share about their lives within minutes of meeting him. He asked the makeup artist about her son's college applications, complimented the wardrobe coordinator's progress at her new job, and spent 10 minutes in genuine conversation with a security guard about his daughter's upcoming wedding. This was Jonathan being Jonathan, present with people, seeing them, making them feel valued. The crew fell in love with him instantly, the way crews always did. He wasn't performing kindness. He was simply kind. What Jonathan didn't know, what he couldn't have possibly known, was that Joy Behar had spent the previous evening locked in her home office with a very different kind of preparation. She'd printed articles, bookmarked atheist forums, compiled lists of the most provocative questions about Christianity, biblical contradictions, and religious hypocrisy she could find. She arrived at the studio 90 minutes early, unusual for her, clutching a black leather folder stuffed with notes written in her sharp, aggressive handwriting. Whoopi Goldberg noticed immediately during the pre-show production meeting, her eyes narrowing with concern as she watched Joy flip through page after page of prepared attacks. Whoopi tried asking what was going on, her tone careful, already sensing trouble brewing beneath Joy's forced smile. Joy waved her off with a tight expression that held no real warmth, only fierce determination and something that looked dangerously close to personal vendetta. The makeup artists exchanged knowing glances as they worked on both hosts that morning, whispering to each other in the corners. They'd seen this before. They recognized the signs. Joy Behar was hunting. And when Joy hunted someone's beliefs, when she set her sights on dismantling faith on live television, blood was inevitable. Someone always left that stage wounded. The studio audience filed in with an energy that felt almost electric, many clutching their phones and whispering excitedly about getting to see the man who played Jesus in person. Mothers brought daughters, church groups arrived together wearing matching Chosen t-shirts, and even some skeptics showed up out of pure curiosity about the show that had somehow captured the cultural moment. The warm-up comedian did his routine, getting easy laughs from the crowd already primed for a good time. The familiar View theme music began to play, that upbeat melody that signaled another morning of hot topics and celebrity conversations. The cameras went live, the red lights glowing like warning signals that nobody in that audience could possibly interpret. And then Jonathan Roumie walked onto that stage with the grace and genuine warmth that had made him beloved by millions, completely oblivious to the fact that he was walking straight into an ambush that Joy Behar had been constructing for hours. Whoopi Goldberg opened the segment with her signature blend of authority and warmth, her voice carrying easily over the studio. Welcome back to The View. We are so excited to have with us today Jonathan Roumie, the incredibly talented actor who brings Jesus to life in the phenomenon known as The Chosen. She smiled genuinely, and there was real respect in her tone. Whoopi had always maintained a complex relationship with faith, never hostile, often curious, frequently challenging but rarely cruel. She gestured toward Jonathan with an open hand. "Jonathan, welcome. It's truly an honor to have you here." Jonathan settled into the guest chair with easy, relaxed grace, his posture open and engaged in that way he had of making everyone in the room feel like they mattered. "Thank you so much, Whoopi. Thank you all for having me. I'm really excited to be here and talk about this incredible journey." His voice was warm, genuine, carrying none of the calculated polish that so many actors brought to promotional appearances. This was just Jonathan being himself. The first few minutes unfolded exactly as his publicist had promised. They discussed The Chosen's meteoric rise, the unconventional crowdfunding model that had launched it, the way the show depicted Jesus not as a distant religious figure but as fully human and fully divine. Jonathan spoke eloquently about the responsibility he felt in the role, the hours of prayer before every scene, the letters he received from people around the world whose lives had been changed by seeing Jesus portrayed with such authenticity and love. The audience was completely engaged, nodding along, many with tears already forming as he shared a story about a woman who'd written to say the show had saved her marriage. Sunny Hostin asked a thoughtful question about the research he'd done into first-century Judaism. Sarah Haynes complimented his dedication and asked how he balanced the spiritual weight of the role with normal life. It was professional, inspiring, exactly the kind of uplifting segment that morning television audiences loved. But those paying close attention, those who knew the subtle tells, could see Joy Behar's posture beginning to shift in her chair. Her smile was still fixed in place, but it was growing tighter with each passing minute, the edges becoming sharper, more forced. Her questions, while still superficially friendly on the surface, were beginning to carry a different weight, an edge that made several audience members exchange uncertain glances. She would ask something that sounded like curiosity but landed like skepticism, her tone doing work her words tried to hide. Sunny glanced toward the producers standing off camera with a questioning look, her intuition picking up on something the audience hadn't fully registered yet. Whoopi's eyes narrowed almost imperceptibly, and she leaned back slightly in her chair, a defensive posture that regular viewers would recognize. Something was building beneath the pleasant surface. Something was gathering like a storm just offshore. Something was about to break. Joy Behar leaned forward suddenly, and the shift in her energy was so palpable that the studio audience actually went quiet mid-applause. Her smile had transformed into something else entirely, something that could only be described as predatory curiosity mixed with theatrical skepticism. She tilted her head slightly, and when she spoke, her voice carried a tone that made every person in that room sit up straighter. "Jonathan, I have to ask you something, and I hope you don't mind, but it's what a lot of people are probably wondering." She paused deliberately, letting the tension build, her eyes locked on his with an intensity that felt almost aggressive. "You really believe all of this, don't you? This isn't just a role for you. You actually believe that Jesus was the Son of God, that miracles happened, that all of these stories are literally true." The way she emphasized the word literally dripped with condescension, as if the very concept was something only foolish people entertained. The temperature in the studio dropped 10 degrees in an instant. There was an uncomfortable ripple of nervous laughter from the audience, that involuntary release of tension when something feels wrong but nobody knows quite how to respond yet. Jonathan's expression didn't change. His smile remained gentle, his posture stayed relaxed, and his eyes held a kind of peaceful knowing that suggested he'd faced this exact question 1,000 times before. "Of course I do, Joy. My faith isn't separate from my work. It's the foundation of everything I do. Playing this role isn't pretending for me. It's an honor, a calling, and yes, I believe with everything in me that Jesus Christ is exactly who he said he was." His voice carried no defensiveness, no edge, just simple, unshakable conviction delivered with the kind of calm that only comes from genuine certainty. But Joy wasn't done. Not even close. She leaned back in her chair with an exaggerated theatrical gesture, her eyebrows arched high in that expression she reserved for moments when she wanted the audience to know she found something absurd. "But Jonathan, come on. We're in 2024. We have science, we have archaeology, we have historical records. How do you reconcile ancient stories written thousands of years ago by people who didn't understand basic biology with everything we know now about how the world actually works?" She waved her hand dismissively, as if brushing away centuries of faith with a single gesture. "I mean virgin births? Walking on water? Rising from the dead? These are fairy tales, Jonathan. Beautiful fairy tales, sure, but fairy tales nonetheless." The audience shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and several people exchanged glances that said this is going somewhere bad. Whoopi's jaw tightened visibly, and she shot Joy a look that communicated clearly knock it off, but Joy either didn't see it or chose to ignore it completely. Sarah Haynes tapped her note cards nervously against the desk, the small sound somehow loud in the tense silence. Sunny Hostin, herself a person of deep Catholic faith, looked down at her hands, clearly uncomfortable with where this was heading but uncertain how to intervene without making it worse. Jonathan's smile never wavered, but something in his eyes shifted, a depth appearing that suggested he understood exactly what was happening here, that this wasn't really about intellectual curiosity or honest questions. This was about something else entirely. "Faith and reason aren't enemies, Joy," he said gently, his voice carrying a kindness that somehow made the contrast with her aggression even more stark. "They're meant to work together. Science tells us how things work. Faith tells us why they matter. One explains the mechanics of the universe. The other explains the meaning." Joy laughed, but it wasn't a warm laugh. It was sharp, dismissive, designed to make him feel small. "That's a nice soundbite, Jonathan, really? But what about the millions of people who've suffered in the name of religion? What about the hypocrisy, the scandals, the abuse, the wars fought over whose invisible friend is better?" Her voice was rising now, passion overtaking performance, and something raw was bleeding through. What about the people who were told they weren't good enough, weren't pure enough, weren't faithful enough? What about the LGBTQ kids kicked out of their homes by Christian parents? What about women controlled and silenced by religious men? How do you stand there promoting this, knowing what religion has done? The studio went absolutely silent. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. This had crossed from challenging questions into something else, something personal, something that felt less like journalism and more like a wound being ripped open in public. Whoopi moved to intervene, her hand coming up, her mouth opening to redirect, but Joy kept going, unable or unwilling to stop herself now. "Your show gives people false hope, Jonathan. It tells them to pray instead of act, to have faith instead of facing reality. It's spiritual opium, and you're the dealer with the kindest face. Jonathan sat perfectly still through all of it, not defensive, not angry, not even visibly shaken. His hands remained folded calmly in his lap, his breathing steady and deep, as if he was centering himself in something beyond the chaos swirling around him. When Joy finally stopped, breathing hard from her passionate outburst, he simply looked at her with eyes that held something that looked remarkably like compassion. The audience wasn't sure what to do. Some wanted to applaud his composure. Others wanted to defend him. Many just sat frozen, witnessing something that felt too raw, too real for morning television. And in that moment of charged silence, Jonathan Roumie leaned forward slightly, and when he spoke, his voice was gentle but carried a weight that made every person in that studio lean in to hear. "Joy, can I tell you something with all respect and all love?" The room held its collective breath, waiting for what would come next. Joy Behar's eyes narrowed slightly, her posture defensive, arms crossed over her chest like armor she was preparing for battle. She nodded curtly, her jaw set, clearly expecting some kind of theological argument or defensive sermon that she already had 10 counterpoints prepared for. But what Jonathan said next wasn't what anyone in that studio expected. His voice was soft, almost tender, carrying the kind of compassion that can only come from someone who genuinely sees past anger to the pain underneath. "You're not angry at me, Joy. You're not even really angry at faith or religion or the chosen." He paused, and his eyes held hers with such gentle certainty that she couldn't look away even though something in her wanted to. "You're angry at people who used faith as a weapon against you or someone you loved. You're angry at hypocrisy dressed up as holiness. You're angry at judgment disguised as righteousness. And Joy, I am so deeply, profoundly sorry that happened to you." The studio went completely silent. Not the uncomfortable silence from before, but something different, something holy. Joy's face changed in that instant, a flicker of something vulnerable breaking through her defensive armor, something that looked dangerously close to tears before she caught herself and pushed it back down. Her mouth opened as if to respond, but no words came. She hadn't expected compassion. She'd expected a fight. Whoopi Goldberg's eyes widened, and she leaned back in her chair slowly, a look of profound respect crossing her features as she recognized what she was witnessing. This wasn't debate. This was ministry happening in real time. Jonathan continued, his voice steady and filled with a gentleness that somehow carried more power than any aggressive defense ever could. "The Jesus I know, the Jesus I spend every single day trying my absolute best to portray with authenticity and love, he wouldn't argue with you right now, Joy. He wouldn't pull out scripture to prove you wrong. He wouldn't defend himself against your accusations." His eyes were glistening now, emotion evident but controlled. He would weep with you over every single wound that religion inflicted. He would sit with your pain, with your questions, with your righteous anger at people who claimed to represent him but showed you the exact opposite of his heart. Because that's what real faith does. Real faith doesn't defend itself with arguments and apologetic. Real faith loves people exactly where they are, exactly as they are, with no conditions attached. The audience was absolutely transfixed. Several people had hands over their mouths. Others were crying openly, tears streaming down faces that couldn't look away from what was unfolding. This wasn't entertainment anymore. This wasn't a talk show segment. This was something raw and real and transformative happening before their eyes. Sunny Hostin had both hands pressed to her chest, her own eyes wet with tears. Sarah Haynes was nodding slowly, completely absorbed. Even the camera operators, professionals who'd seen thousands of interviews, were locked in place, unable to move because moving felt like it would shatter whatever sacred moment was taking shape. Jonathan leaned forward slightly, his voice dropping lower but somehow carrying to every corner of that studio with perfect clarity. "You asked me how I reconcile faith with suffering, with hypocrisy, with all the pain that's been done in God's name. Joy, I don't reconcile it. I grieve it. Every single day, I grieve what's been done to twist something beautiful into something that wounds people." His hands opened in a gesture of complete vulnerability. "But here's what I know with absolute certainty. The Jesus I read about in Scripture, The Jesus whose life I study and pray over and try desperately to honor with my work, that Jesus spent his entire ministry confronting religious hypocrites. He called them whitewashed tombs. He overturned their tables. He defended the people they condemned. He touched the untouchable, loved the unlovable, welcomed the rejected. If Jesus walked into a room today, I genuinely believe he would walk right past the people carrying Bibles and head straight for the ones who've been hurt by the people carrying Bibles. Joy Behar sat completely still, and for the first time in the entire interview, her defensive posture cracked. Her arms uncrossed slowly. Her tight expression softened. And in her eyes, something shifted, some wall coming down brick by brick. Whoopi reached over and gently touched Joy's arm, a gesture of support and acknowledgement. The standing ovation started slowly, one person in the back row rising to their feet, then two more, then an entire section, until the entire studio audience was standing and applauding, not with the aggressive energy of taking sides in a fight, but with something that felt more like gratitude, like relief, like witnessing something they desperately needed to see. This wasn't about winning an argument. This was about love defeating cynicism in real time. Whoopi Goldberg was the first to speak, and her voice carried a weight of genuine emotion that regular viewers rarely heard from her. She leaned forward, her hands pressed flat against the desk, and looked directly at Jonathan with something that could only be described as reverence. "Jonathan, I have been doing this show for years. I have interviewed presidents, activists, celebrities, all kinds of people. But what you just did right there, that was something I have never witnessed on this stage." Her voice cracked slightly, and she had to pause to compose herself. The audience erupted again, their applause sustained and thunderous. Joy Behar sat motionless, her eyes fixed on the desk in front of her, her jaw working as if she was trying to find words that kept slipping away. When she finally looked up at Jonathan, her expression was completely stripped of the aggressive certainty she'd carried into this ambush. "I didn't expect that," she said simply, and there was no sarcasm in it, no defensive humor, just raw honesty. "I came here with questions, and you gave me something I didn't know I needed." She paused, shaking her head slowly. "Thank you for that." Sarah Haynes reached across and placed her hand over Jonathan's, her eyes bright with tears. "You just modeled something beautiful. You showed us what it looks like to love someone in the middle of an attack." Sunny Hostin nodded emphatically. "As a person of faith myself, thank you for representing us well. Thank you for showing that faith doesn't have to be defensive. It can just be love." Whoopi glanced at the floor manager signaling for commercial but waved him off. "No, not yet. This moment deserves more." She turned back to Jonathan, and her smile was genuine, warm. "You came here to talk about a television show, and you ended up giving us a masterclass in grace." The red lights went off, and something quieter happened, something more profound. Joy stood and walked off the set without a word, not with angry energy but like someone who needed space to process something that had cracked open a door she'd kept locked for years. Backstage, a lighting technician named Marcus approached Jonathan, his hands shaking, eyes red. "Mr. Roumie, what you said about Jesus defending people hurt by religion, that's me. I walked away from church 10 years ago because of how I was treated." Tears streamed down his face. "Can you tell me if there's a way back?" Jonathan placed both hands on Marcus's shoulders and said simply, "Brother, you never left. He's been waiting for this exact moment." Right there, in the backstage chaos, Marcus fell to his knees asking about salvation while crew members gathered around them in quiet prayer. Within 30 minutes, the clip was everywhere. Not as celebrity drama, but as something people needed to see. Comments flooded in, "I'm not religious, but this made me cry. This is what Christianity is supposed to look like. I've been hurt by church, and this is the first time I've felt hope about faith in 20 years." By sunset, traffic to The Chosen's website increased 400%, and the search term, The Chosen Jonathan Roumie, hit 2.3 million queries that night, the single largest spike in interest the show had ever experienced. What was meant to be a trap had become a testimony. What was meant to wound had become a witness. And what Joy Behar intended as an ambush had instead become the most powerful advertisement for authentic Christianity that daytime television had ever broadcast. Jonathan Roumie walked out of ABC Studios that November morning exactly as he'd walked in, unchanged by the ambush, untouched by the applause, carrying the same quiet peace he always carried. There was no victory lap, no triumphant social media post, no interview circuit to talk about what happened. He simply thanked the crew, hugged the security guard who'd shared about his daughter's wedding that morning, and left as humbly as he'd arrived. For Jonathan, this wasn't about winning an argument or proving skeptics wrong. This was simply about loving people exactly where they were, exactly as they were, and trusting that truth spoken in love would do whatever work it was meant to do. Joy Behar never publicly addressed the interview in detail, but those close to her noticed something shift in the weeks that followed. She became quieter about faith topics, less aggressive in her questioning of religious guests, more thoughtful in her approach to conversations about belief. Maybe Jonathan's words had planted a seed that would take years to grow. Maybe they'd simply reminded her of something she'd forgotten about the faith she'd walked away from so long ago. Whatever happened in her heart remained private, known only to her and God, and perhaps that was exactly how it should be. Because real transformation doesn't happen on camera for applause. It happens in the quiet moments when we're finally alone with truth we can no longer ignore. The crew member who fell to his knees backstage, Marcus, started attending a small church near his home 3 weeks later. He brought his wife, who brought her sister, who brought her teenage son struggling with depression. That son would later credit Jonathan's appearance on The View as the moment that made him curious enough about Jesus to give faith a chance. 6 months later, he'd be leading a youth group for kids who felt rejected by traditional church. One moment of grace had rippled outward in ways no one could have predicted or measured. But perhaps the most profound impact wasn't measurable in search statistics or viewership numbers or even in individual testimonies, as beautiful as those were. The real impact was in how that 9-minute segment became a reference point, a standard, a living example that people of faith could point to when asked what Christianity should actually look like in a hostile world. It proved that you don't have to match aggression with aggression. You don't have to answer mockery with defense. You don't have to win arguments to win hearts. Sometimes the most powerful sermon is simply loving your enemy so genuinely, so completely, so supernaturally that they're forced to confront whether what they're fighting against is actually the thing they've been searching for all along. The View had tried trapping Jonathan Roumie on faith, thinking they could expose it as foolishness under the harsh lights of skeptical interrogation. But what they'd actually done was give him a platform to demonstrate something the world desperately needed to witness. That faith tested by fire doesn't crumble into ash. It transforms into something that burns so bright, so pure, so undeniably real that even those who came to extinguish it find themselves drawn to its warmth instead. Joy came armed with questions designed to destroy. Jonathan came armed with nothing but love. And in the end, love didn't just win the argument. It rendered the argument irrelevant entirely. Because when grace encounters cynicism on live television, when compassion meets attack with nothing but more compassion, when someone embodies the very Christ they claim to follow, the impact isn't just viral. It's eternal. And that kind of power, the kind that changes hearts instead of just winning debates, that's the kind of power that no amount of skepticism can ever fully explain away.